answered. On today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, we'll be discussing a poll that I asked of the Florida Panthers Championship Window. What is their window according to you, the fan? We're also going to be giving another player grade on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Who is it going to be? Find out on this edition of the show. And we're going to have some more conference final talk with Jacob Winans here on today's episode of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
Your Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, June 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from PantherParkway.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at MonoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers. And thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Don't forget to also subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark. We'll be covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. So, Cats fans, if you can see on the video version of this show, temporarily we're going back to Zoom and just uploading the videos up to the YouTube after the fact, because the streaming service that I currently use is having a little bit of trouble with my microphone cutting the audio cutting in and out, but with the Zoom, it's not doing any of that. So for now, we're not going to be doing any live shows here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And of course, with the controls on the Zoom as well, you can see that immediately I have my Wednesday guest host of the show, Jacob Winans, here to discuss all things Florida Panthers. Jacob, welcome back to another Winans Wednesday.
Thank you for having me, as usual. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man. And of course, let's talk a little bit about how the Florida Panthers, and give a little bit more perspective of their championship window. So on the Locked On Florida Panthers Twitter page, I posed a question about the Florida Panthers' championship window and where the fans kind of see where the Florida Panthers are. And 67 fans have voted on the poll, and 58% of the fans say that it's around the 2 to 3 year range. 27 say 1 to 2 years, and then the rest say 3 to 4 years. So not surprised with the results that are given. And of course, it goes into consideration also the amount of players who have around that same terms of their contracts, the majority outside of the the Barkoffs, the Ekblads, and of course Bobrovsky. Of course, we're hoping that Huberto signs a long-term extension, but the fact that contract structures are the way they are, it doesn't surprise me that this poll results in the 2 to 3 year range for this team.
Right. I tend to agree with that. I think when Zito put this team together, I think a lot of it was based on a 2 to 3 year window. If you just look at some of the key players on the roster, we've got like Verhaeghe, Duclair, Reinhart. These are guys that are signed anywhere from like 2 to 3 years in their contracts, and that's not including Forsling, Montour. So we've got guys who are here locked up for that general term. The key with that is not that we're going to get rid of all of them when that time expires or when that 2 to 3 year window ends. It's just most of those guys that I just mentioned there are going to be due significant raises at that time. So we get to a point where you can't keep everybody. There's going to come a time where each off season we're probably losing at least one key piece and trying to replace them with something at a discount, and that doesn't always have the greatest results. So as far as keeping this group together with some level of the same depth that we saw this season, we got about 2 to 3 years to do it with this group. And we're already going to get our first taste next year of not being able to keep everyone. It's going to be that time. We're going to lose some parts this off season, but it's only going to get progressively more losses when that 2 to 3 year period kind of expires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, for some context, COVID doesn't help, but of course, everybody is going through it right now when it comes to their cap crunches, especially the contending teams. But let's look at, I want to give a little bit of more perspective in the last 10 years of, and I did it based on the teams that have made the Stanley Cup final and lost, that did not win a championship in the last 10 years, but made it all the way to the Stanley Cup final. 2012, the New Jersey Devils, after they make the Stanley Cup final, they go on a 5-year playoff drought after that. The Boston Bruins, they make it the next year, but they don't make the playoffs the next 2. New York against the LA Kings, they make it the next year against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but then they go into a rebuild. Tampa Bay is one of the exceptions to the rule. They've contended and continued to do so. San Jose, they are, as far as our generation of watching hockey, they have been that team that have won the most playoff series without lifting a cup. So they've had multiple cracks at it. And then 2 other examples of teams that have fallen short of the Stanley Cup, the Nashville Predators and the Boston Bruins. The very next year after making the Stanley Cup final and losing, they've won President's trophies, but they haven't been able to lift the cup. And Vegas lose in their very first year of existence, make the conference final twice after, but they might have been robbed an opportunity of advancing further the very next year after that 5-minute major against San Jose, the very next year too. And then you see Dallas and Montreal don't even make the postseason the years after they make the Stanley Cup final, which when I read all of that, I just think that the next season that the Florida Panthers have, the mentality of this team has to be in the form of unfinished business. The team is pissed. The management is pissed. I'm sure the ownership is pissed. The fan base is pissed about the shortcomings of this team. And of course, we're watching a conference final with the New York Rangers and the Tampa Bay Lightning, which we'll discuss more in the third segment about how they're converting on the power plays. And then of course the Florida Panthers going 1 for 31 on the power play, and just going into next season, just the mindset and it's not going to be, I feel like it's going to be more business like next season, as opposed to, of course, when you have fun, you have fun when you win. But I feel like next year is going to be very, very business like going into the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we talk about it nonstop, but Tampa, when they lose in the first round in 2019, the next year they come back and they struggled out of the gate a little bit, but they really just became like a machine almost. They showed up, they do their job, they take 2 points and they go home. And that's really how they've gone about their business the last 2 years. And it got to a point where they, 2 years in a row, seeing us in the playoffs, where the exciting team, the team that everyone is like, oh well, this might be their year. Tampa didn't flinch either time. They were as confident and as laser focused as they ever were, and that's where the Panthers have to get to. And I think it starts next year. I think of course it's fun when we got the building going with the We Want 10 chants, and it's high scoring, fast paced. The comeback wins, all of that stuff is great. It was a lot of fun. The President's Trophy was a nice thing to get this year, but next year I really don't think the Panthers care any about that. I don't think the Panthers care about stats. I don't think they care about how many goals they score. I don't think they care about the Mambo number 5 and all that stuff that was so much fun this year. I think they're just going to show up to the rink and do their job and win games. And that's really how championship teams get the job done. So you mentioned some of those teams in your list of people who almost got there, made it to the final or got close, and then had a really hard time getting back. It's not guaranteed that you're ever going to get another chance. So the Panthers need to assuming they get there at some point in the next 2 to 3 years, it has to be if you get there, you need to win it. It sounds that it's a lot easier said than done, but those chances don't come by often. So they have to capitalize while they have the talent, while they have the not cap room, but while they're able to fit this group under the cap. Your mention of San Jose, that's like the nightmare scenario. You never want to become that, where you contend every year, you keep your team together, but you just can't get it done, and then eventually the clock runs out. So I'm excited for what they're going to do next year. But watching some of these teams right now, it's very businesslike, and the Panthers have to learn that.
Yeah, and once again, that's what it takes in order to do that, because we're used to only spot playoff appearances for this team of 2012, a few years of not going to the playoffs, 2016, a few years of going to the playoffs, and now we're at 3. Toronto is 5 years in a row of losing winner take all games, and that includes the COVID bubble against the Columbus Blue Jackets just a few years ago. So now, like, Maple Leaf fans going into the regular season this year, we're thinking, oh, this is nice, but can you win a first round for the Leafs? For the Panthers, it was always, of course, can you get it out of the first round? Now they got that. We discussed this once again. They got that monkey off their back getting the first round. Now it's, at this point, there could be another 13-game winning streak. Of course, we could be excited all we want as well, but I'm at that point with this team where it's just like, I really don't want to. It's mostly about trying to keep an even keel too. And next season, I know it's still fresh and we're only in June and the season opening night isn't until mid-October, but for now, like, what I'm thinking and hoping to go into these regular season games is that when things go right for a long stretch of time, an example, another 13-game winning streak, I personally don't want to get too high on it, because of course we can easily see a playoff collapse like what we saw in round 2.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. This sounds kind of callous and maybe a little bit too hockey purist. But I personally, when it comes to all those things like the President's Trophy, the long win streaks, the most comeback wins in the NHL, I think next year, if we do see a repeat of any of that, I personally don't care. I just don't, and I don't think any of the fan base or any of the players care anymore either. They got a lot of stuff out of the way this year. They proved they can be dominant. Huberto became one of the elite point producers in the game. Barkov is still an elite two-way player, and they finally gotten their respect. They've now gotten out of a first round, which hasn't been done in forever. They checked all those boxes. Now it's simply, what are you going to do when you get to the playoffs? Can you win it all? Nothing. There's no more questions to answer. It's get there. Can you win it all? That's the expectation now. There's nothing else really matters at this point. It's just about that end result at this point now.
Win, baby, win. That's what matters for this Florida Panthers team now, as they go into this season, and it's gonna be a business-like approach, I'm sure, regardless of where this team goes, regardless of where Bill Zito goes as far as the coach, which we still don't have word on about the decision, but anything could happen. Still no announcement on that. But we're going to continue our player grades series for the Florida Panthers, evaluating this season for each individual player on the Florida Panthers. But first, we're going to tell you all about Rock Auto. And with the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more on the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, Reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Second segment here on this June 8th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It's a Winans Wednesday edition of the show. And Jacob, so started doing some of my player grades yesterday for the Panthers. Did Alexander Barkov yesterday. So now let's do another piece on this Florida Panthers team. It's going to be easy at first for me to do player grades for this team, starting off with the superstar players who've had the best season, going all the way down. So it's only going to get harder from there. So let's go to the other another very important piece of the Florida Panthers who might get an extension this summer, still waiting, and that is Jonathan Huberdeau. What can we say about the season he's had? 115 points, tied for second. Of course, he was out of contention of the Art Ross with the final two games, which justified healthy scratching him the last two games along with everyone else. But 30 goals, 85 assists, a few assists away from breaking the record of wingers in general of assists. He broke the record for left wingers, was just a few away from Jaromir Jagr of 96 and Nikita Kucherov of 2019. Started playing PK this year, and honestly I felt sometimes that every other game that him and Eetu Luostarinen on the PK unit were creating a rush going the other way shorthanded, and that was something great to see out of that unit, which I really do believe that Eetu is going to get qualified and offer. I really do believe that. But of course, with the disappointing playoffs for the Panthers, we wanted to see Jonathan Huberdeau become more of a shooter. And at times this season, we wanted him to become more of a shooter as well. And that's where, but it's hard to dump on 115 points too. When you have that much and you're producing to the point where you're tied for second, it's really hard to really criticize Huberdeau's game, even though we want him to be more of a shooter.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit a lot of the same talking points that are really discussed with Huberdeau. As far as a player grade, if I'm doing a player report card on him, I'm giving him an A-. I think 115 points is outrageous. 85 assists, that is unbelievable. There's 82 games in the season. He had 85 assists. So he's getting over an assist a game, not over a point per game, over an assist per game. That's not even counting his goals. 85 points is an incredible season, but that was in addition to 30 goals. For a guy who doesn't shoot as much as he probably should, 30 goals is pretty ridiculous in itself. 30 goals is the threshold you try to reach to be considered a elite or high-end goal scorer, and he did that as well. Honestly, his skill set, if he wanted to, he could score 40 goals a season. He has that kind of wrist shot. He has that kind of stick handling ability. He could be a 40-goal scorer if he wanted to. I don't think he ever will, just because he passes too much. But that's his game, and that's perfectly fine. If he's given me 30 goals and 80 assists every year, anything even close to it, I can't complain. I think he made big strides in his defensive game this year, like we have not seen from him before. I think he became a really good two-way forward in a lot of ways. And a lot of people are going to pull up the analytics and things and say that the defense wasn't there, but his defense passes the eye test. His penalty killing was solid. So yeah, he gets an A-. The only thing really for me missing from his game, I feel like he took a step backwards in physicality. I think last season he played with a little bit more physical edge, and then he sort of lost it this year. But the big thing is the playoff performance. He gets an A-. It would have been an A+ if he had shown up the same in the playoffs. I think he regressed in the playoffs this year, and he's going to have to figure that out. If he had put together a better showing in the postseason, then he gets a full A+ from me. But the A-, there's just a little bit there, just a little bit of meat that he left on the bone this season, and I think that was evident in the postseason. And that could be good. It's something he can think about over the summer. It's something he can have in the back of his mind as he goes through his training and preparing for next season. So I'm going to give him an A-.
I'm going to give him an A- as well. And it's funny because in 2021, he was tied for the most points after round one and didn't even have as many points this time around in more games, playing 4 more games to be exact for Huberto than he did the year before. So definitely regressed a little bit in the playoffs. But I mean, I'm not, when you see that 82 game sample size, I don't think that his playoff performance here is going to make his game slow down by any stretch of the imagination. I find that really hard to believe. And I tend to think I'm a little observant, and that's just my ego talking there. But the other day was Jonathan Huberdeau's birthday, and he's very active on social. He was very active on social media, but I haven't seen Jonathan Huberdeau. Well, what I mean by active on social media is Instagram mostly. I haven't seen him really post on Instagram in the last few weeks, and I don't know how much to read into it, but I don't see him posting as much on his story in the last few weeks in relation to his life. And I'm not sure if he's taking the playoff loss hard or anything. I mean, I'm sure he is, but I don't know how hard he's taking it. But we saw it on the look in his eye last year in Tampa after Game 6. I wonder if Jonathan Huberdeau is following kind of in the footsteps of Sergei Bobrovsky when kind of stepping a little bit away from it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think is notable. I think especially around his birthday, I personally, I feel like he turned 29. By this time next year, he will hit that age 30 mark, and players tend to, their prime tends to start to taper off by like 32, 33 years old. So I think he's also seeing for himself, you know, he's getting older. He's been in the league a while now, and like I said, you only get so many chances at this, and there was a lot of wasted time in his career trying to build this. Barkov as well. They're getting a late start compared to what they should have been, the playoff success they should have been having, but due to a lack of depth, a lack of quality trades and drafting, you know, it's stuff that's out of his control. He's just now getting these chances now as he's about to hit that age 30 mark, and it's pressure on him to get it done while he has this chance, while he's at the top of his game. So, you know, if he's taking that to heart after this playoff loss, I'm fully for that. I think it's really good for him to focus in and just be ready. Like I said, laser focused, business like approach next year. I think he is, as much as anyone, is someone who could really get on board for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not to say that you can't have a social media presence and still be successful in like what you do. That's not to say that. And I mean, he was very active and he got 115 points too. So I mean, but as far as I don't know if there's any fans out there who might have. He did reply to a few people in his DMs about saying thank you. There's some screenshots shared out there, but I could also imagine some of the fans out there that might take this too seriously, that might say some angry messages as well, and maybe that might have been saying, no, I'm not going to tolerate this, and nor should he. Neither. No player should have to tolerate that. I mean, at the end of the day, I know that I podcast and I do this for a living, but at the same time, these are grown men playing a kid's game, and they are having fun out there. And of course, we as fans kind of at the time at a point treat this like our livelihood, that our quality of life is going to change over a game. If we really sit back and think about it, and some of the harassment that players get when they lose is just it's just something that the older I get, the more upset I get that fans behave that way. I mean, after Game 7's loss of Toronto and Tampa Bay, Maple Leaf fans were fighting each other outside their section, and I'm just like, I just maybe that could have been that too for Jonathan Huberdeau. Who knows?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, honestly. They took a lot of heat, and I understand people are passionate. This is very important to a lot of people because I understand fans invest time, they invest money, they invest a portion of their life into this. So I get it. But at the same time, you have to remember that these athletes are still people. And I like we talk about when it comes to playoffs, effort is everything. And I think when fans start to question a player's effort, that's when they tend to lose sight of that line between person and product. And they're not products. They're still people, and they are giving an effort just by being out there and putting in the work to be a professional athlete. It's not a lack of effort. So I think from that standpoint, yes, I could understand anyone on the Panthers taking a step back from social media right now, because if I were in that position, I definitely would, especially if I was taking some of the heat and criticism that has been coming their way. I think of a guy like Mackenzie Weegar. It's absolutely brutal what he was going through during this series and afterwards. I mean, he's a guy that's a fan favorite all year long, and then after a poor 10 games or so, people are wanting to run him out of town and harassing him on the internet. And I can't remember what her name was, and I feel really bad that it's escaping me right now, but a family member of Mackenzie Weegar's did post on social media that he was keeping up with the things people were saying, and he was hurt. He was really hurt at the end of the season because he was disappointed in himself for letting people down. But you got to remember, you can't do that. You just can't do that. You cannot cross that line, because he's a person, and he's feeling that, and he's disappointed enough in himself. So I agree with you 100%. And if that's the reason for some of this social media like step back, then totally understood. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Mackenzie Weegar's Instagram, by the way, is private. So for now, so and if he has every right to put it in that setting, if people are going to be assholes about it, you don't, if you're going to be an asshole towards someone and swear at them, and even to the point of threats, then I'm sorry, you don't deserve the access to that person's life outside of what you watch on the TV. That's for sure. And that's really all I got to say about that. We went on that longer than I definitely anticipated, but let's transition over to the next segment, where we're going to talk about the conference final, the Western Conference final, and right now the Eastern Conference final as well. But first, we're going to tell you all about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, NHL Stanley Cup Conference Final, Major League Baseball, and of course, the latest fighting news from MMA, UFC, and boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Third and final segment here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. So, Jacob, let's talk a little bit about conference final. The Colorado Avalanche sweep the Edmonton Oilers in comeback fashion, down 3-1, and find a way to win. And a lot of the goals were a lot of questionable goals by Mike Smith. The 5-hole was open. Nathan McKinnon sped through, and Cale Makar, his goal in the beginning of the game was a beautiful screen in front of the net that Mike Smith didn't even see. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl both averaged 2 points a game in 16 games in the postseason. And I feel bad mostly for Leon Draisaitl, because if you watch those games live, you see that dude is clearly hobbled from what happened with his injury from his ankle. I forget which one it is, but how hobbled Leon Draisaitl was towards the latter part of this series. And I haven't seen some of the reports that have come out on the severity of his injury, but man, McDavid and Draisaitl put everything on the line for Edmonton, and just Colorado was just too much for them. They're up and down the lineup. They're just better. Even though they're doing it with a backup goaltender, Sam Girard's not playing for the Avs. Nazem Kadri is likely out the rest of the postseason, but he didn't rule it out neither. Cale Makar is my favorite right now on the Colorado Avalanche to win the Conn Smythe with what he's doing. But man, this Avs team is definitely on a mission. And the last Western Conference team to make it to the Stanley Cup final, only losing twice, was the 2012 LA Kings. And that team won it all in that year against the New Jersey Devils. So just, I don't know if I can see a team stopping Colorado right now.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous what they're doing. To have a 12-2 record in the postseason is just outrageous. And like you said, they're doing it with massive holes in their lineup. I mean, you lose Sam Girard along the way to broken sternum. Edmonton takes a bite out of Colorado with the cheap shot from Evander Kane on Kadri. I really hope Kadri is able to get back at some point in the postseason, but obviously it looks unlikely. Darcy Kemper has missed games in multiple series now with injuries. Pavel Francouz has been great. So you talk about a team that is maximizing their cup window. They're going to lose some key parts this summer, potentially Kadri, potentially Nichushkin. They're going to lose some very, very key parts of their roster at the end of this season. And I think they're playing like a team that knows this might be their last chance with this group. Not to say they're going to be bad or not in contention beyond the season. I fully expect them to be back and make more deep runs for the next half decade. But this might be their best shot at it, and they're really showing that in the way they're playing. But yes, I can't talk about that series without mentioning Edmonton and some of the guys that what they've been playing through. Draisaitl in particular, he's playing on one leg. It's ridiculous what he's been able to do this postseason. McDavid has been unreal. I think he just ran into a really tough matchup with Cale Makar, who's basically the defense version of McDavid. But McDavid still produced. And then another guy who's taken, like we were just talking about with the social media hate, Darnell Nurse has been raked over the coals this entire postseason. It came out last night that he's been playing the entire playoffs with a torn labrum or a torn hip flexor. A torn hip flexor, which if you've ever played hockey on ice, your hips are everything. And he's playing, especially as a defenseman, because you have to skate backwards. Right. And he's playing with a torn hip flexor. They just ran out of steam. The injuries took too much out of them, and their stars could only carry them so much. So Colorado is just they're a wagon. I don't know what else you can say about them. That team, I'd be shocked if they don't win the cup. I think whoever comes out of the East, I think Colorado's got them in 5, maybe 6.
Mm. And then some of the trade acquisitions that they got with Josh Manson and Arturi Lehkonen scored the game-winning goal, and he did the same thing last year against the Vegas Golden Knights to advance to the Stanley Cup final. So making a clutch play right there for Colorado again. So getting guys with experience as well. So that Joe Sakic winning a Stanley Cup as the captain of the Colorado Avalanche, and now doing it as a GM, that dude's already etched in Colorado Avalanche history. But to do it on the level of a GM position as well, man, that dude, you have to give Joe Sakic the keys to the city. That's for sure. For if he doesn't have them already. Now to the Eastern Conference final. Right now we're recording this, and it's the intermission for Tampa Bay and New York. Tampa Bay is leading 1-0. There was a goal that was disallowed that was looked to be poked into the net. But the referees ruled it no goal because they lost sight of the puck on the replay. So no confirmation. And Pat Maroon, Fat Pat, gets a rebound goal there. And just going into this morning from, I guess I see it mostly from Florida Panthers eyes, and just seeing how much Tampa Bay continues to bounce back and capitalize on their breaks. And I just think about it, and I feel like, I know this is a must win for Tampa because, of course, you don't want to go down 3-1, but I feel like this is just as much of a must win for the New York Rangers. And by the time this comes out, we'll know the result. You'll know the result of the game for those listening. But I feel like this is such a must win game for the New York Rangers because you want to have that separation, because Tampa Bay is more than capable of winning on the road. I mean, you saw them win a championship in the COVID bubble just a few years ago in a situation that over there, it felt like kind of like the Twilight Zone over there. And just if you're New York, you don't want to have the same situation of only home teams winning, like what happened in Carolina. New York came on the good side of things, finally getting a road win, but there's some trouble, and I feel like if Tampa Bay ends up winning game 4, I feel like they'll just be slobbering for more, and it'll be a dangerous position for New York to be in going back to MSG for game 5.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Tampa is going to win this game. We'll know tomorrow when this comes out, but I do think Tampa is going to win this game, and I do think they're going to win the series. Their experience is starting to show now. They stayed the course last game despite a situation that would have scared pretty much any team in the league. You're down 2-0 already in the series, and then you go down a couple of goals at home. At that point, you're thinking, this could be over for us. Tampa didn't even seem rattled. They just came right back and ended up winning the game. They've done this a million times. So I think Tampa's going to win this series. I think the longer it goes, New York, we're seeing it now. They're starting to lose bodies. Guys are playing banged up, and Tampa just has more to work with. Plus, the longer this goes, the higher the likelihood is that Braden Point is able to get back in. And that could be a massive game changer. So I think he gives Vasi some time to settle in. They start to let their experience wear on New York. I think Tampa is just going to outlast them in this, to be honest. Despite the fact that I love Gallant and I love Vetrano, and I'm happy to see them succeed. I think Tampa's got too much here. So that's my prediction. But I'll say this also. I'm really, really hoping this series goes to 7 games, because Justin Bieber is actually scheduled to perform at Madison Square Garden the same night that a game 7 would take place there. And I would just love to see what Gary Bettman and the NHL schedule makers do to find a way out of that jam. So I crave chaos. So.
Well, actually, some news related to that. Justin Bieber actually canceled his Toronto shows this week. So due to an illness, no confirmation of whether it's COVID or not. So chances are he's going to cancel his show at MSG on Monday. And there was supposed to be a 2-day break in between game 6 and 7. So that the game 7 is supposed to be on that Tuesday, and the Justin Bieber concert is supposed to be on Monday at MSG. Man, MSG, I feel like they only have like 20 days out of the year where they don't have an event there. The rest of the time, there's always something going on there. I mean, at one point they had the New York Liberty there. Now the New York Liberty play at the Barclays Center, and I'm not sure what they do really during the summer now these days. But that venue is just always busy, filled with so many events, and it'll definitely create a little bit of chaos. That's for sure. But with the New York Rangers, man, I also maybe it's not only just the Florida Panthers fan in me, but it's also the South Florida sports fan in me as well. As a Dolphins fan as well, I know you're a Cowboys fan, Jacob, but Dolphins fans have seen the New England Patriots get so many breaks over and over and over again. And Tom Brady found a way to win games late and game-winning drives under 2 minutes. There was always that saying of giving Tom Brady too much time. But so maybe it's kind of relating one division rival in one sport and relating it to another. I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning have won multiple cups. So we've seen how well-coached teams with superstar players, with a GM that puts things together well, and players who are willing to take less money to play for a winner as well. Like, I mean, for example, Corey Perry lost 2 straight cups to the Lightning, and then he joins them. So part of me wants to impersonate that scene from Star Wars Episode 3. Is like, you were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them. It's like you were supposed to destroy the champions, not join them.
Yeah. If the Rangers lose, I'm going to be on my Star Wars too. You were the chosen one. The Rangers were supposed to do it, but it's hard to watch Tampa be so successful. It really is. But I will also say this on this series, and I have beaten this horse. This is such a dead horse, and I'm going to continue beating this dead horse. The Rangers, they are succeeding doing exactly what we were begging Florida to do the entire playoffs on this podcast. It's it's the power plays, it's the one-timers, they're doing everything that we knew the Panthers could do, but we just didn't make the adjustments. I mean, Mika Zibanejad has feasted shooting one-timers on the high blocker, and Esflag is so successful at that, and you didn't even give him the chance. So I'm in physical pain watching this series because Florida could have done exactly what New York is doing to them, and we just didn't do it. It's hard. I am in physical pain.
Yeah, and going back to your Michael Scott quote,
I'm dead inside.
Yeah, and also, even though I can't play this song on the podcast, because due to copyright reasons, there's a good song to listen to in relation to this. It's called "Dead Inside" by Muse. It's on their Drones album for any Muse fans out there that want to listen to it. So yeah, it's really hard to watch, but as this not being the Florida Panthers as our team playing in it, I kind of watch it stress-free, but I kind of watch it annoyed at the same time as far as the Eastern Conference goes. But but again, by the time you guys listen to this, you'll know the results of the game. But Jacob, I want to thank you once again for joining this Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Definitely. You can follow me at Jacob Winans 8 on Twitter. You can find my work on pantherparkway.com, and you can find me here every Wednesday.
Thanks again, man, and see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for having me.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On NHL and the Crosscheck NHL show with Andrew Berkshire and Mary Clark of the Week, covering all the postseason activities around the National Hockey League. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for your second listen of the day, make sure to listen to today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy team. Follow the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast on the Odyssey app or wherever you get podcasts. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team